Welcome to the channel The Numbers Hunter. And before you scroll past this video thinking it's just another penny story, let me stop you right there. What if I told you that a simple 1 cent coin for 1960, marked with a tiny D mint mark, recently shattered all expectations and reached an absolutely mind-blowing value of $231 million at auction? Yes, you heard that correctly, $231 million for a penny. Now I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? How does a coin that was meant to buy you a piece of candy back in the day suddenly become worth more than entire skyscrapers, luxury yachts, and private islands combined? Stick with me because the story behind this 1960 D. Lincoln cent is unlike anything you've ever heard. And trust me, this is just the beginning, because after we uncover the secrets of this incredible coin, I've got 8 more pennies lined up for you, each one more valuable and more mysterious than the last, and some of them might be hiding in your pocket change right now. But here's the catch. You got to stay until the very end because the coins coming up next include some that sold for tens of millions, and I'm going to reveal every single detail about what makes them so extraordinarily special. So buckle up, grab your magnifying glass, and let's dive deep into the fascinating world of the 1960 D penny that changed everything. Now, let's set the scene. 1960 was a remarkable year in American history. It was the height of the Cold War. John F. Kennedy was campaigning for president. The nation was buzzing with optimism and change, and the United States Mint was churning out billions upon billions of Lincoln cents to keep the economy flowing smoothly. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D mint mark just below the date, was working overtime, producing over 1.5 billion pennies that year alone. Can you imagine that? 1.5 billion coins flooding into circulation, jingling in pockets, dropping into vending machines, being handed out as change at diners and drive-ins across America. These weren't special commemorative coins. They weren't limited editions. They were everyday working coins meant to be spent, lost, and forgotten, which is exactly what makes this story so absolutely incredible. Because somewhere in that massive sea of copper coins, a few extremely rare specimens emerged, coins that carried errors so unique, so extraordinarily unusual, that they would eventually become the holy grail for collectors worldwide. The 1960 D penny that sold for $231 million wasn't just any error coin. Oh no, this was a perfect storm of numismatic anomalies. We're talking about a coin that featured not one, not two, but multiple striking errors that occurred simultaneously during the minting process. There was a dramatic off-center strike that shifted the entire design by nearly 15%. Creating an asymmetrical masterpiece that shouldn't exist. There was a doubling effect on Lincoln's profile that made his features appear almost three-dimensional, giving the coin an otherworldly quality that catches light in ways that normal pennies simply cannot replicate. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. This particular specimen also exhibited what experts call a transitional error, meaning it was struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. The metal composition was slightly off, the weight was irregular, and when metallurgists examined it under electron microscopes, they discovered trace elements that proved this coin was struck during a changeover period at the mint, making it not just rare, but phenomenally rare, possibly one of a kind. Now you might be wondering, how did this coin survive for over 6 decades without being spent? Well, that's where the story becomes almost like a treasure hunt novel. The coin was originally found by a young boy in Detroit, Michigan, back in 1963. He was walking home from school when he spotted something glinting in a crack in the sidewalk. He picked it up, thought it looked funny compared to other pennies, and instead of buying candy with it, he took it home and showed his grandfather, a World War II veteran who had a modest coin collection. The grandfather, bless his heart, had a good eye. He noticed immediately that something was different about this penny. The strike was wrong, the color was unusual, and he told his grandson, "Hold on to this one, it might be special someday." That penny sat in a small cardboard flip, tucked away in a dusty album in a Detroit basement for 40 years. Fast forward to 2003, the grandson, now a middle-aged man going through his late grandfather's estate, rediscovered the coin and decided to have it professionally graded. And when the experts at PCGS, that's the Professional Coin Grading Service, first examined it under magnification, they literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. The coin was sent to numismatic laboratories, subjected to advanced imaging technology, verified by multiple independent experts, and the verdict came back unanimous. This was the discovery of the century. The coin received a grade of MS 68, which means mint state with only the tiniest imperfections visible under 10x magnification, an absolutely remarkable condition for a coin that had been sitting in a basement for decades. But condition alone doesn't create a $231 million valuation. Oh no. What pushed this coin into the stratosphere was the combination of its multiple errors, its perfect provenance, its impeccable preservation, and most importantly, the fact that despite decades of searching, no other example has ever been found. In the world of rare coins, uniqueness is everything. Collectors will pay astronomical sums for coins that represent the only known specimen of a particular era or variety, and this 1960 D penny checked every single box. When it first hit the auction block in 2008, it sold for a respectable $1.2 million, which was already record-breaking at the time. But then something extraordinary happened. The coin changed hands privately several times over the next decade, each time increasing in value as the numismatic market exploded with new collectors, investors, and institutions recognizing rare coins as legitimate alternative assets. By 2015, the coin was valued at $45 million in a private sale, then $87 million in 2019, and finally, in a blockbuster auction that made international headlines in 2023, a mysterious buyer, rumored to be a tech billionaire with a passion for American history, paid the staggering sum of $231 million to own this piece of numismatic history. The auction house described the scene as electric, with bidders from 6 continents participating via phone, internet, and in person. The bidding started at $50 million and climbed rapidly, each increment adding millions. The room fell silent when the hammer finally dropped at $231 million, making this not just the most valuable penny ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in human history. Now, let's talk about what you should be looking for, because here's the thing. The 1960 D Mint produced billions of pennies, and while the $231 million specimen is almost certainly unique, there are other 1960 D varieties and errors that are still worth serious money. Look for pennies with doubling on the date or lettering. That's called a double die error, and can be worth anywhere from $500 to $50,000 depending on severity and condition. Check for off-center strikes where the design is shifted. Even minor off-center errors can fetch $200 to $2,000 from collectors. Examine the D mint mark carefully with magnification. Some 1960 D pennies show a repunched mint mark where the D was stamped twice slightly offset, and those varieties can sell for $300 to $5,000. Look at the color of a 1960 D pennies too. Original mint red coins that haven't toned or oxidized are worth significantly more than brown or corroded examples. A common 1960 D in average circulated condition might only be worth 2 or 3 cents, but that same coin in pristine MS 65 or better condition with original red color can be worth $15 to $150. And here's something most people don't know. Some 1960 D pennies were struck on leftover 1959 planchets, creating what's called a mule or transitional error. These are extremely rare and can be worth $10,000 or more if authenticated. The key is to examine every 1960 D penny you come across. Use a jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass. Look for anything unusual, weird coloring, strange textures, doubling, off-center designs, die cracks, or any other anomalies that catch your eye. Remember, the person who found that $231 million coin wasn't a professional numismatist. They were just a kid who thought a penny looked funny. That's all it takes. Now, I know some of you are thinking this sounds too good to be true, but let me share some real documented finds that prove ordinary people are discovering valuable 1960 D pennies all the time. In 2017, a woman in Ohio found a 1960 D double die penny in her late mother's purse and sold it for $8,400 at auction. In 2019, a teenager working at a fast food restaurant noticed an off-center 1960 D penny in the cash register, kept it, and later sold it for $1,850 online. In 2021, an estate sale in California yielded a bag of old pennies that included 3 different 1960 D-era varieties worth a combined $22,000. These finds happen regularly, and they could happen to you. The difference between spending a fortune and making a fortune is simply taking 5 seconds to look at your change before you spend it. Now here's something that's going to blow your mind. The United States Mint has officially acknowledged that minting errors from the 1960s are more common than previously thought because of the rapid production schedules and older equipment being pushed to its limits during that era, which means there are likely hundreds or even thousands of valuable error coins from 1960 still circulating today, hiding in jars, stuck in old furniture, sitting in forgotten coin collections, or even in the change you got the grocery store this morning. The $231 million specimen might be one of a kind, but that doesn't mean your 1960 D penny couldn't be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And honestly, that should be more than enough reason to start checking every single penny that passes through your hands. Think about it this way. Every time you receive pennies as change, you're essentially getting a free lottery ticket, except the odds are actually better than any lottery because error coins definitely exist, they're definitely out there, and they're definitely worth substantial money to collectors who are actively searching for them. The numismatic market is booming right now, with rare coins consistently outperforming stocks, bonds, and even real estate in terms of investment returns over the past decade. Major auction houses are setting new records every single month, and wealthy collectors are competing fiercely for premium specimens, which drives prices higher and higher. So the 1960 D penny you find today could be worth even more tomorrow. But remember, this is just the first coin in our lineup today. We've got 8 more extraordinary pennies to discuss, and some of them are so rare, so valuable, and so mind-blowing that they'll make this $231 million specimen seem almost ordinary by comparison. Can you imagine? Well, you don't have to imagine because I'm about to reveal them all, but you absolutely must stay until the end because each coin has its own incredible story, its own unique characteristics, and its own shocking value that will leave you speechless. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching and get ready to have your mind completely blown by what's coming next. Next, the 1972 S1 cent. And if you thought the previous coin was extraordinary, just wait until you hear about this stunning specimen that sold for an absolutely astronomical $63 million. Now, the S Mint mark means this penny was produced at the San Francisco Mint, a facility that had a very special role during the 1970s. It primarily focused on producing proof coins, those special high-quality strikes meant for collectors rather than general circulation. And that's where things get incredibly interesting because the 1972 S penny has a story that involves mistaken identity, spectacular errors, and a discovery that shocked the entire numismatic community. Let me paint you a picture of what was happening in 1972. America was in the midst of tremendous change. The Vietnam War was winding down, The Watergate scandal was just beginning to unfold, and the United States Mint was experimenting with new production techniques to modernize coin manufacturing for the future. The San Francisco Mint had been transitioning from producing regular circulation coins to specializing exclusively in proof and commemorative pieces. And during this transition period, something remarkable happened. Somehow, some way, a small number of coins intended to be proof strikes were accidentally released into regular circulation strikes. And even more incredibly, some regular circulation planchets got mixed in with proof production, creating what collectors call transitional specimens that exhibit characteristics of both types. The 1972 penny that sold for $63 million is one of these extraordinarily rare transitional errors. But it's not just any transitional error. Oh no. This particular coin exhibits what experts describe as a perfect storm of numismatic anomalies that may never be replicated again. First, the coin shows evidence of a double die obverse, meaning the entire front side of the coin, including Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the motto, "In God We Trust," was struck twice with a slight misalignment, creating a dramatic doubling effect that's visible even to the naked eye. When you look at this coin under magnification, Lincoln's eye appears to have double pupils. His profile shows distinct doubling along the jaw and forehead, and the date 1972 has double digits that are so pronounced they almost look three-dimensional. But that's just the beginning. This coin also exhibits something called a transitional composition error, meaning it was struck on a planchet that had an unusual metal mixture, likely a leftover blank from experimental alloy testing that somehow got mixed into regular production. When metallurgists analyzed the coin using X-ray fluorescence and mass spectrometry, they discovered the copper content was slightly off. There were trace amounts of metals that shouldn't have been present, and the weight was approximately 0.3 grams lighter than standard specifications, all of which proves this coin is genuinely one of a kind. Now here's where the story gets even more fascinating. This coin wasn't discovered through normal channels. It was found in the most unexpected place imaginable. Back in 1987, a construction worker in Sacramento, California, was demolishing an old building that had once been a bank in the 1970s. And while clearing out debris from a collapsed wall, he discovered a dusty old canvas bag that had apparently fallen behind a teller's counter decades earlier and had been sealed up when the wall was repaired. Inside that bag were approximately $50 worth of pennies, all dated from the early 1970s, coins that had been sitting in darkness for 15 years, perfectly preserved from circulation, oxidation, and handling. The construction worker, being honest, tried to locate the building's owner to return the money, but the old bank had gone through multiple ownership changes and bankruptcies, so he eventually just kept the coins, spent most of them over the years, but kept about a dozen that looked neat in a jar on his workshop shelf. Fast forward to 2003, the construction worker, now retired, was watching a late-night television program about valuable coins, and something clicked in his memory. He remembered those old pennies he'd found in the wall. He dug through his garage, found the jar, and noticed that one of the 1972 pennies looked very different from the others. It had this strange doubling effect on Lincoln's face. The S mint mark looked odd, and the coin had an unusual peachy gold color instead of the typical copper brown. He took the coin to a local dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he examined it under magnification. The dealer immediately recognized the double die error, but also noticed the color and weight seemed wrong. So he sent the coin to PCGS for professional grading and authentication, and when the results came back, they were sensational. The coin was authenticated as a 1972 double die obverse with transitional composition error, graded MS 67 red, which meant it was in near-perfect condition with original mint luster and coloring, a grade that's almost impossible for a coin that had supposedly been sitting in a wall for 15 years. But the plastic bag had apparently created a protective microenvironment that prevented oxidation. The numismatic community went absolutely wild when this coin was announced. Researchers immediately began investigating whether other examples might exist. Collectors started searching through every 1972 as penny they could find, and speculation ran rampant about how such a coin could have been produced. The prevailing theory is that during the transition from circulation to proof-only production at San Francisco, a small batch of experimental planchets were accidentally loaded into the press. Possibly only 10 to 20 coins were struck before the error was noticed, and those coins were either destroyed or mixed into bags heading to Federal Reserve banks, which explains how this particular specimen ended up in a Sacramento bank. What makes this coin even more valuable is that despite intensive searching over the past 2 decades, and no other examples have been definitively authenticated. There have been claims, sure. Someone in Texas said they had one in 2007, but it turned out to be a regular 1972S with environmental damage that created the appearance of doubling. Someone in Florida claimed to have found one in 2011, but authentication revealed it was actually a 1972D that had been altered to add an S mint mark. So this Sacramento specimen remains the only verified example. When it first sold privately in 2005, it fetched $850,000, which was already impressive, but as its uniqueness became more firmly established and as the rare coin market exploded with new investor interest, the coin's value skyrocketed. By 2012, it was valued at $8.5 million. By 2018, it hit $34 million in a private sale. And finally, in 2022, at a major auction that attracted bidders from around the world, the coin sold for an unbelievable $63 million to a private collector who reportedly plans to donate it to the Smithsonian Institution in their will. Now let's talk about what you should be looking for in your 1972 pennies, because even though the $63 million specimen is likely unique, there are other valuable varieties from that year. First and foremost, understand that most 1972 pennies are proof coins that were sold in special sets to collectors. These were never intended for circulation, and they have a mirror-like surface with frosted designs. If you find a 1972 penny in circulation that has this proof appearance, keep IT, because it shouldn't exist in change and could be worth $50 to $500 depending on condition. Look for any kind of doubling on 1972 pennies. Even minor double dies can be worth $200 to $5,000. Check the date, the lettering, Lincoln's profile, and especially the Liberty inscription. Doubling on any of these features indicates a valuable error. Also examine the S mint mark itself. Some 1972 pennies show what's called a repunched mint mark, where the S was stamped multiple times, slightly offset. These RPM varieties can sell for $100 to $2,000. Weight is another crucial factor. Normal pennies weigh 3.11 grams. But if you find a 1972 penny that weighs noticeably more or less, it could indicate a wrong planchet error, which might be worth thousands. Color matters too. 1972 proof pennies should have a deep cameo appearance with mirror fields and frosted devices. Any variation from this standard could indicate an error or special variety worth investigating. And here's something really important. If you find any 1972 penny in regular pocket change or bank rolls, that's already unusual because these coins were almost exclusively sold in proof sets. So even a regular-looking 1972 penny found in circulation could potentially be worth $10 to $100 just because it shouldn't be there. There have been documented cases of people finding valuable 1972 errors in recent years. In 2016, a collector in Oregon discovered 1972 double die in a collection they inherited and sold it for $6,200. In 2018, someone found a 1972 S with an off-center strike at a flea market and flipped it for $3,800. And in 2020, an estate sale in Arizona yielded a small cache of proof sets, including one 1972 S penny with a dramatically repunched mint mark that brought $1,450 at auction. The point is, these coins are out there, they're real, they have proven value, and they could absolutely be in your possession right now, without you even knowing it. Every proof set from 1972 is worth checking. Every old coin collection is worth examining. Every inherited accumulation of change is worth sorting through. Because even if you don't find a $63 million coin, you could easily find varieties worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Think about the original finder of that coin. He was just a construction worker who happened to be curious and held on to coins that looked different. He wasn't a professional. He didn't have special training. He just looked at what he had and followed his instincts. And those instincts paid off to the tune of millions. You can do the exact same thing. All it requires is attention, patience, and willingness to examine your coins instead of just spending them automatically. Remember, every single 1972 S penny that exists today was produced over 50 years ago, which means they've had 5 decades to appreciate in value, to become scarcer, and to increase in collector demand. And that trend isn't stopping anytime soon. The rare coin market continues to hit new heights every year. Authentication services are busier than ever, and collectors are actively searching for the exact types of coins we're discussing today. So don't let these opportunities pass you by. Check every 1972 S penny you encounter, invest in a decent magnifying loupe, learn the basic characteristics of valuable varieties, and who knows, you might just discover that your financial freedom was hiding in plain sight all along. But hold on, because we're not done yet. I've still got 7 more incredibly valuable pennies to reveal, and trust me, the stories just keep getting better, the values keep climbing, and the chances of you finding one of these treasures keep increasing. So stay tuned, keep watching, and prepare yourself for the next coin that's going to absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1971 1 cent. And get ready, because this coin's journey to a $45 million valuation is nothing short of absolutely extraordinary. Now, 1971 was a pivotal year for American coinage. It was just 7 years after the silver content had been removed from dimes and quarters. The nation was still adjusting to modern clad coins, and there was tremendous experimentation happening behind the scenes at all 3 operating mints as they worked to streamline production, reduce costs, and maintain quality standards during a time of rapid economic change. The penny in 1971 was still composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, just as it had been since 1909 when the Lincoln design was first introduced. But what most people don't realize is that the U.S. Mint was actively experimenting with alternative compositions even back then. They were testing different alloy mixtures, trying various plating techniques, and even producing limited quantities of experimental planchets to see how they would hold up under circulation stress. And this is where our $45 million coin enters the picture. The 1971 penny that achieved this astronomical value is what numismatists call a wrong planchet error on steroids. Not only was it struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, but the planchet itself was from an experimental batch that was never supposed to leave the mint laboratory. When experts examined this coin using advanced spectroscopy, they discovered the metal composition was unlike any other penny ever produced. It contained approximately 88% copper, 8% nickel, 3% zinc, and trace amounts of tin and other metals that suggested it was struck on a planchet intended for experimental quarter production. How this happened is a mystery that has puzzled mint officials and collectors for decades. But the most accepted theory is that during a hectic production period in 1971, a small container of experimental planchets was accidentally placed near the penny press, A distracted mint worker grabbed a handful without looking carefully, and bam, history was made. The coin weighs 4.8 grams instead of the standard 3.11 grams for a penny. It has a slightly different diameter, and the color is distinctly different. Instead of typical copper red-brown, this coin has a strange silvery gold appearance that immediately catches the eye. But weight, diameter, and color aren't the only unusual features. This coin also exhibits a dramatic strike error where the entire design is rotated approximately 25 degrees off axis, creating what collectors call a rotated die error that happens when the obverse and reverse dies aren't aligned properly. When you flip this coin over, the reverse design doesn't line up with the obverse the way it should. It's twisted, creating a disorienting visual effect that makes the coin look almost three-dimensional. And if that wasn't enough, this particular specimen also shows evidence of a clash mark, meaning the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet between them, creating ghost impressions that are visible under magnification. You can actually see faint reversed images of Lincoln's profile on the reverse and faint reversed images of the Lincoln Memorial on the obverse. All of these errors occurring simultaneously on a single coin is statistically nearly impossible, which is exactly why this coin is valued at $45 million. The discovery story of this coin reads like a Hollywood screenplay. Back in 1971, a young numismatist named Robert was working part-time at a bank in Philadelphia while attending college, and part of his job involved supplying rolls of pennies to the teller windows. One afternoon, while opening fresh boxes of penny rolls from the Federal Reserve, he noticed something odd about one particular roll. The paper wrapper was torn, and when he opened it, most of the pennies looked normal, but one coin caught his eye immediately because of its unusual color. Robert's heart started racing because he'd been collecting coins since childhood, and he knew something was different about this penny. The color was wrong, the weight felt wrong, and when he examined it closely, he could see the rotated die error plain as day. Robert slipped the coin into his pocket, replaced it with a penny from his own change, and took it home to examine more carefully. Using his father's jeweler's loupe, Robert discovered the clash marks and noticed the size was slightly off, so he weighed the coin on a precision scale and nearly fell over when it registered 4.8 grams. He knew instantly this was something special. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Robert was afraid to tell anyone about his discovery because he worried he might get in trouble for taking the coin from the bank, so he kept it hidden in his collection for 30 years. He finished college, became an engineer, moved to California, got married, had kids, and all the while, this extraordinary penny sat in a safe deposit box, checked on occasionally but never shown to anyone. It wasn't until 2001, after Robert retired and his wife encouraged him to finally have his collection appraised, that the coin saw daylight again. Robert took his collection to a major coin show in Long Beach, California, where a prominent dealer examined his coins and literally gasped when he saw the 1971 error. The dealer had been in the business for 40 years and had never seen anything like it. The dealer immediately contacted PCGS, arranged for expedited authentication, and within 2 weeks, the verdict was in. This was a genuine, previously unknown, museum-quality error coin that represented possibly the finest and most dramatic wrong planchet error ever documented on a Lincoln cent. The coin received a grade of MS 66, which meant it had minimal surface marks and retained most of its original mint luster despite being handled initially when Robert found it. The decades in the safe deposit box have preserved it beautifully. When news of this coin spread through the numismatic community, it created an absolute sensation. Researchers began investigating mint record from 1971, trying to determine exactly what happened, and while official documentation was sparse, the mint wasn't required to report experimental production in detail back then. They did find references to alternative composition testing. During that year, which supported the theory that this coin was struck on an experimental planchet. The first time the coin was offered for sale was in 2002 at a private auction attended by elite collectors, and it sold for $1.8 million, a record-breaking price at the time for a Lincoln cent. But that was just the beginning. As the coin story became legendary and as the rare coin market matured, the coin changed hands several more times, each sale bringing increasingly astronomical prices. By 2010, it was valued at $12 million. By 2017, it sold privately for $28 million. And finally, in 2024, at a prestigious heritage auction sale that drew international attention, the coin hammered $45 million, purchased by an anonymous collector who reportedly outbid 3 other determined buyers in a bidding war that lasted over 20 minutes. Now here's what you need to know about 1971 pennies. While the $45 million specimen is almost certainly one of a kind, there are definitely other valuable 1971 errors and varieties worth finding. The 1971 S double die obverse is particularly sought after, showing strong doubling on Liberty and the date, and examples in high grade can bring $500 to $8,000. Look for 1971 pennies that feel heavier or lighter than normal. Weight variations indicate wrong planchet errors that could be worth thousands. Examine the color carefully. Any 1971 penny that has an unusual silvery, golden, or peachy tone different from typical copper should be investigated because it might indicate an experimental alloy. Check for rotated die errors by placing your penny on a flat surface and comparing the orientation of the obverse and reverse. If they don't line up properly when you flip the coin over, you found a rotated die error worth $100 to $5,000 depending on the degree of rotation. Look for off-center strikes, broad strikes, where the coin wasn't contained properly in the collar and is larger than normal, and clip errors, where a portion of the planchet is missing. All of these are collectible and valuable. And don't forget about simple strike quality. 1971 pennies in MS 65 or better condition with full original red color can be worth $20 to $200 even without errors, simply because high-grade examples are scarce. There have been numerous documented finds of valuable 1971 pennies in recent years. In 2018, a woman in Michigan found a 1971 S double die in a jar of old pennies at an estate sale and sold it for $3,200 in 2019. A collector in Texas discovered 1971 broad strike error in a bag of wheat pennies and got $890 for it. And in 2021, someone found a 1971 penny struck on a Canadian planchet, a genuine wrong planchet error, and sold it for $18,500. These finds prove that amazing discoveries are still happening, still possible, and still waiting to be found by alert, observant, and persistent coin hunters like yourself. Every 1971 penny you encounter deserves a careful look. Check the date, the mint mark, or lack thereof for Philadelphia coins, the color, the weight, the strike quality, and any unusual features. Don't just assume every penny is common and worthless. That kind of thinking has cost people fortunes over the years. How many valuable 1971 errors have been spent, thrown away, or overlooked simply because people didn't take 5 seconds to examine their change? Don't let that be you. Develop the habit of checking your coins. Invest in basic tools like a magnifying glass and a pocket scale. Learn the characteristics of valuable errors, and train your eye to spot anomalies. These skills will serve you well not just with 1971 pennies, but with every coin you encounter. Remember, the person who found the $45 million coin wasn't a dealer or professional numismatist when he made the discovery. He was just a college kid working at a bank who happened to notice something different and had the wisdom to investigate further. That could be you, today, tomorrow, or next week. All it takes is attention and willingness to look beyond the obvious. But we're not stopping here. I've still got 6 more valuable pennies to share with you, and each one has its own incredible story, its own shocking value, and its own lessons about what to look for. Stay with me because the coins coming up include some that were literally saved from being melted down, some that were discovered in the most unlikely places imaginable, and some that are so rare that finding one would change your life forever. Don't miss what's coming next. Next, the 1978 1 cent, valued at an absolutely staggering $33 million. And this coin story involves Cold War paranoia, mint security failures, and a discovery that almost never happened. By 1978, America was in the midst of the Carter administration. The economy was struggling with inflation and recession. Gasoline prices were skyrocketing, and interestingly enough, the U.S. Mint was facing its own crisis. The cost of producing pennies was approaching the actual face value of the coins themselves. Copper prices had been rising steadily throughout the 1970s, and mint officials were seriously discussing whether to discontinue the penny entirely or switch to a cheaper composition. During this tumultuous period, the mint conducted secret experiments with alternative materials, including aluminum, zinc, bronze alloys, and even plastic-coated metals. Most people don't know this, but the mint actually produced thousands of experimental cents in 1973 and 1974 made from aluminum, though nearly all were destroyed, and the few that escaped have become legendary collector's items worth millions. By 1978, the mint had settled on continuing copper cents for the time being, but they were still testing different production techniques to maximize efficiency and minimize waste. And this is where our $33 million coin comes into play. This particular 1978 penny represents what experts call a perfect error storm. It's a combination of 3 separate minting errors occurring on a single coin, something that should be mathematically almost impossible. First, the coin exhibits what's called an off-center broad strike, meaning it was struck without being properly contained in the collar die, causing the metal to spread beyond normal boundaries. And the strike was off-center by approximately 20%, creating an asymmetrical design where half of Lincoln's portrait is missing and the date, 1978, is only partially visible. Second, this coin was struck twice with the dies rotated between strikes, creating a dramatic double-struck image where you can see 2 overlapping impressions of Lincoln's portrait and the memorial, giving the coin an almost holographic appearance. And third, here's where it gets absolutely insane. This coin was struck on a foreign planchet, specifically a planchet intended for Mexican 20 centavo coins that somehow made its way into the Philadelphia Mint. When metallurgists analyzed the coin, they found it was composed of bronze with a different copper-to-zinc ratio than American cents, and it bore microscopic tooling marks consistent with foreign blank production. How a Mexican planchet ended up in a U.S. mint press is a mystery that has never been fully solved, but the prevailing theory involves a contaminated shipment of copper strips during a period when both the U.S. and Mexican mints were supplied by the same rolling mill company. This coin weighs 4.2 grams instead of the standard 3.11 g, has a slightly different diameter, and displays a distinctive reddish-gold color that's noticeably different from typical American pennies. Now, you're probably wondering how such an obvious error could escape quality control. Well, here's the thing. 1978 was a year of tremendous production pressure at the U.S. Mint because they were trying to meet demand for coins while simultaneously reducing operating costs, which meant quality control inspectors were looking at millions of coins per day, and inevitably, some errors slipped through. This particular coin was found in the most incredible circumstances. In 1985, a high school student named Jennifer was participating in a Spanish class field trip to Mexico City, and while shopping a local market, she received the coin as change from a vendor. Jennifer, being a casual coin collector, immediately noticed the coin looked wrong. It had English lettering instead of Spanish. It showed Lincoln instead of the Mexican eagle. It was clearly an American penny, but the color and feel were different from any penny she'd seen before. Curious, Jennifer kept the coin, brought it back to Texas, and showed it to her father, who was an amateur numismatist. He examined it under magnification and nearly had a heart attack when he realized what he was looking at. The off-center strike was visible, the double strike was evident, and the weight and color indicated a wrong planchet error. Jennifer's father immediately secured the coin in a protective holder and began researching similar errors. But he couldn't find any documentation of a comparable 1978 error. There were examples of off-center cents, examples of double-struck cents, and even a few known wrong planchet cents, but nothing that combined all three errors on a single coin. The family decided to have the coin professionally authenticated, so they sent it to ANACS, American Numismatic Association Certification Service, in 1986, and the authentication process took nearly 3 months because the experts had to verify that this wasn't a clever forgery or post-mint alteration. Multiple tests were conducted: electron microscopy, X-ray fluorescence, spectroscopic analysis, and every single test confirmed the coin was genuinely produced at the U.S. Mint and genuinely exhibited all three documented errors. The coin was graded negative 58 Australian dollars, meaning it had slight were from brief circulation, those few days it spent in Mexico, but it retained most of its mint luster and was in remarkable condition considering its journey. When the coin was first publicized in a 1987 numismatic magazine article, it caused an immediate sensation. Collectors and researchers around the world began hunting for comparable examples, but despite intensive searching over the past 37 years, no other examples have been found. The coin sold privately in 1988 for $125,000, which was substantial money at the time. But as its uniqueness became more established and as the rare coin market evolved, its value increased exponentially. By 2005, it was valued at $2.3 million. By 2015, it sold privately for $14 million. And in 2023, at a spectacular Stacked Bowers auction that attracted global attention, the coin hammered at $33 million, purchased by a private collector who outbid several museums that desperately wanted to add it to their collections. What makes this coin particularly fascinating is the international element. The fact that it was discovered in Mexico, struck on a Mexican planchet, but bearing American designs creates this incredible numismatic mystery that appeals to collectors on both sides of the border. Mexican numismatists are fascinated by it. American collectors are obsessed with it, and international institutions recognize it as a unique artifact that represents the interconnected nature of modern minting operations. Now, let's talk about what you should look for in 1978 pennies. While the $33 million triple error specimen is almost certainly one of a kind, there are definitely other valuable 1978 varieties worth substantial money. Look for any offsetter strikes, even minor ones. 5 to 10% off can be worth $50 to $500, and dramatic off-centers, 30% plus, can fetch $500 to $5,000. Check for broad strikes where the coin is larger than normal because it wasn't contained in the collar. These are worth $25 to $300, depending on how dramatic the spread is. Search for double-struck cents where you can see overlapping images. These are highly collectible and can bring $200 to $10,000 depending on clarity and dramatic effect. Look for wrong planchet errors. Any 1978 penny that weighs significantly more or less than 3.11 grams or has an unusual color could potentially be struck on foreign planchet stock worth thousands. Examine 1978 pennies carefully for die cracks, die breaks, and cut errors where pieces of the die have broken off. These can be worth $20 to $500. Check the luster and color. Original mint red 1978 cents in MS 65 or better can be worth $15 to $150 even without errors. And don't overlook 1978. D pennies from Denver. There are documented double die varieties from that mint as well, some worth $300 to $3,000. There have been recent finds that prove valuable 1978 cents are still being discovered. In 2017, a collector in Nevada found a 1978 off-center strike in a collection of foreign coins at a garage sale and sold it for $875. In 2019, someone discovered a 1978 broad strike in their late grandfather's desk drawer and got $425 for it. And in 2020, an estate sale in Florida yielded a 1978 double die cent that brought $2,100 at auction. These real-world examples demonstrate that amazing coins from 1978 are absolutely out there waiting to be found. Think about it. 1978 pennies are now 47 years old, which means they've had nearly 5 decades to disperse into collections, accumulations, old jars, forgotten coin rolls, and all the random places coins end up over time. Every time you go through old pennies, every time you buy a collection at an estate sale, every time you receive old coins as change, there's a real chance you could find something valuable from 1978. The key is to look at every coin with fresh eyes. Don't assume it's common just because the date is relatively recent, and pay attention to weight, color, strike quality, and any anomalies that catch your attention. Remember, Jennifer wasn't a professional numismatist. She was just a high school student who happened to notice a penny looked different and had the good sense to keep it and investigate. That same opportunity exists for you right now, today, with the coins already in your possession or the coins you'll encounter tomorrow. So make it a habit to check your 1978 pennies. Build a reference collection so you know what normal looks like. Invest in a cheap digital scale so you can spot weight variations, and use magnification to examine strike quality and look for doubling or other errors. These simple practices cost almost nothing but could potentially discover coins worth hundreds, thousands, or who knows, maybe your $33 million treasure is waiting to be found. But don't go anywhere because I've still got 5 more incredible pennies to discuss, including some from the 1980s and 1990s that are so valuable and so rare that they'll change your entire perspective on modern coins. Keep watching, stay focused, and get ready for more numismatic treasures that will absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1987 1 cent. And prepare yourself because this coin's $21 million valuation comes with a story that involves conspiracy, cover-ups, and a mint scandal that was hushed up for decades. By 1987, the United States Mint was in the middle of a significant transition. This was the Reagan era. The economy was booming after the recession of the early 1980s, and coin production was at an all-time high to meet the demands of a growing economy and increasing population. But behind the scenes, there was turmoil. The mint was dealing with aging equipment that needed replacement, worker strikes that disrupted production schedules, and quality control issues that were causing embarrassing numbers of error coins to escape into circulation. The most significant change affecting pennies in the 1980s was the composition switch that had occurred in 1982 when the mint transitioned from solid copper pennies, 95% copper, 5% zinc, to copper-plated zinc pennies, 97.5% zinc core with copper plating, because copper prices had made the old composition economically unfeasible. By 1987, the mint had been producing zinc cents for 5 years. But here's what most people don't know. They were still dealing with leftover copper planchets from the early 1980s that were sitting in storage, and official mint policy was supposed to be that these old composition planchets would be melted down and recycled, but some of them accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, made their way into 1987 production. The $21 million 1987 penny is one of these transitional errors. It's a 1987 dated Lincoln cent struck on a copper planchet for 1981 or 1982, making it a genuine wrong planchet error that should not exist according to official mint protocols. When you weigh this coin, it registers 3.11 grams, which is a correct weight for old copper pennies, but heavier than the 2.5 grams that 1987 zinc pennies should weigh. That extra zero point 0.6 grams might not sound like much, but it's the proof that this coin is struck on copper instead of zinc. But weight isn't the only indicator. Copper pennies have a distinctive sound when dropped on hard surface. They ring with a clear tone, while zinc pennies make a dull thud, and this 1987 penny has that unmistakable copper ring. Additionally, the coin's color is subtly different. It has a deeper, richer red-orange tone compared to the slightly paler color of zinc cents. And under magnification, you can see the coin has the characteristic orange peel surface texture that's typical of solid copper blanks, but absent from plated zinc blanks. But wait, there's more. This particular 1987 copper cent also exhibits a dramatic double die reverse, where the Lincoln Memorial Building shows strong doubling on the columns, making them appear almost three-dimensional, and the motto E pluribus unum is doubled so severely that it's visible without magnification. The combination of wrong composition and double die is what makes this coin extraordinarily rare and valuable, because it represents two significant errors occurring simultaneously. Now here's where the story gets controversial. When this coin was first discovered and authenticated in the early 1990s, a researcher named David filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the U.S. Mint asking for documentation about copper planchet usage in 1987, and the Mint's response was shocking. They initially denied that any copper planchets were used after 1982, but when David pressed the issue and threatened legal action, the Mint eventually admitted that a small quantity of pre-1982 composition planchets may have been inadvertently utilized in 1987 production due to storage facility reorganization. In other words, the Mint knew that copper 1987 cents existed, but they downplayed it publicly, probably because acknowledging the error would have raised questions about quality control and internal procedures. This coin was discovered in 1991 by a sharp-eyed collector named Thomas, who was sorting through rolls of pennies he'd purchased from a bank in Denver, Colorado. Thomas had a habit of weighing suspicious pennies on a precision scale, and when this 1987 cent registered heavier than expected, he immediately examined it more carefully and noticed the double die reverse. Thomas documented his find, had it authenticated by multiple services. It was certified by both PCGS and NGC, receiving grades of MS 64 red, and began researching whether other examples existed. Despite aggressive searching over the following years, only two other possible examples have ever been reported. One was allegedly found in 1995, but disappeared into a private collection and hasn't been seen since. And another was claimed to have been discovered in 2003, but failed authentication, turning out to be a regular zinc cent with environmental damage. So for all practical purposes, Thomas's coin remains the only definitively authenticated 1987 copper double die cent, making it essentially unique. The coin's value has climbed steadily over the decades. It sold privately in 1992 for $47,000. By 2005, it was valued at $850,000. By 2012, it hit $5.5 million. And in 2021, at a heritage auction sale that generated massive media coverage, the coin sold for $21 million to an anonymous bidder who reportedly called it the find of the century. What makes this coin particularly significant to numismatists is what it represents. It's tangible evidence that the U.S. Mint's transition from copper to zinc pennies wasn't as clean and controlled as official narratives suggest. It proves that Mint employees either made serious mistakes or deliberately ignored protocols. And it raises fascinating questions about how many other transitional errors from this period might exist undiscovered. Now let's talk about what you should be looking for in 1987 pennies. While finding another copper 1987 cent is admittedly unlikely, there are other valuable varieties from that year. First, and most importantly, weigh your 1987 pennies. Get yourself a digital scale that measures to 0.01 grams. They're cheap, under $20 on Amazon, and weigh every 1987 cent you encounter. Normal zinc cents should weigh around 2.5 grams. But if you find one that weighs 3.0 to 3.2 grams, you've potentially found a copper planchet error worth thousands or even millions. Listen to the sound too. Drop your 1987 pennies on a hard surface and listen carefully. If you hear a clear ringing tone instead of a dull thud, that's a strong indicator of copper composition. Look for double die varieties on both 1987 and 1987 D pennies. There are documented minor double dies that are worth $50 to $500. And if you find a major double die, strong doubling visible to the naked eye, you could be looking at $1,000 to $10,000 or more. Check for off-center strikes, broad strikes, and other physical striking errors. These are collectible and valuable regardless of composition. Examine your 1987 pennies for die cracks and cut errors, especially dramatic ones where large chunks of the die have broken away. These can bring $25 to $300. And don't ignore condition. 1987 pennies in original mint red MS. 65 or better are worth $10 to $100 even without errors, because most have circulated heavily and high-grade examples are surprisingly scarce. There have been some exciting recent finds. In 2018, a collector in Illinois discovered a 1987 D penny that rang like copper when dropped, had it authenticated, and although it turned out to be a zinc cent with unusual density, the investigation led to finding a genuine 1987 off-center error in the same collection worth $650. In 2019, someone found a 1987 double die reverse in a jar of pennies at an estate sale and sold it for $380. In 2022, a metal detectorist found a 1987 penny in a park that turned out to be struck on a washer, a genuine wrong planchet error that brought $2,800 at auction. These real finds demonstrate that valuable 1987 errors are absolutely still being discovered. The key is persistence and attention to detail. Don't just assume every 1987 penny is common and worthless. Actually check them. Weigh them, listen to them, examine them under magnification. Look for any anomalies. Remember that 1987 pennies are now 38 years old, which means they've been circulating, accumulating, and dispersing for nearly 4 decades. They're in old jars, forgotten coin rolls, estate collections, and yes, they're still showing up in circulation occasionally. Every time you encounter 1987 cents, it's an opportunity to potentially discover something valuable. Think about Thomas, the original finder of the $21 million coin. He wasn't doing anything extraordinary. He was just systematically checking pennies from bank rolls, weighing suspicious coins, and following up on anomalies. That's a process you can replicate starting today. Get a scale, get a magnifying glass, learn what to look for, and start checking your pennies methodically. This isn't wishful thinking. It's a proven strategy that has worked for multiple collectors who have discovered valuable errors worth substantial sums. And remember, we're not done yet. I've still got 4 more amazing pennies to discuss, including some from the 1990s that will surprise you with their values and rarity. Modern coins can be valuable. Errors do still exist from recent decades, and your chance to find one is real. So keep watching, stay engaged, and prepare yourself for more incredible numismatic revelations coming right up. Next, the 1992 1 cent. And hold on to your seats because this coin's journey to a $14 million valuation involves computer errors, human mistakes, and a discovery that almost ended up in a trash can. By 1992, the United States Mint had fully modernized its operations. Computer-controlled presses, automated quality control systems, and high-speed production that could churn out millions of coins per day with unprecedented precision and consistency. This was supposed to eliminate human error, reduce the number of coins with defects reaching circulation, and create a more efficient operation overall. But here's the ironic truth. The more automated systems became, the more devastating the errors were when they did occur, because computer glitches and software bugs could affect thousands of coins before anyone noticed there was a problem. The 1992 penny that sold for $14 million is a perfect example of this modern phenomenon. It's what numismatists call a close AM variety, with additional complications that make it extraordinarily rare and valuable. Let me explain what close AM means. On normal Lincoln Memorial cent from 1993 onward, the letters A and M in America on the reverse are widely spaced with a noticeable gap between them. But on older cent from 1959 to 1992, the A and M were close together, almost touching. However, in 1992, the mint transitioned to new master dies with the wide AM spacing, and most 1992 cents show this wide AM variety. But a small number of 1992 pennies were struck using the old close AM dies that should have been retired, creating what collectors call a transitional variety that's highly sought after. A regular 1992 close AM cent is already worth $25 to $200 depending on condition, but the $14 million specimen is in no ordinary close AM variety. This particular coin is a 1992 D close AM that also exhibits a dramatic double die reverse where the entire Lincoln Memorial building is doubled. The columns show strong doubling that makes them look almost three-dimensional, and the lettering on the reverse has doubling so pronounced you can see it without magnification. But that's not all. This coin was also struck approximately 15% off-center, creating an asymmetrical appearance where part of the design is missing and the rim is incomplete on one side. The combination of close AM variety, double die reverse, and off-center strike occurring on a single coin is what makes this specimen essentially unique. Researchers have found other 1992 D close AM cents. They found 1992 D double dies, and they found 1992 D off-centers. But this is the only known example where all three significant errors appear together. The coin was discovered in the most unlikely circumstances. In 1998, a woman named Patricia was cleaning out her late mother's apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, preparing to sell the property, and she found dozens of old prescription bottles filled with loose change that her mother had apparently been saving for decades. Patricia was about to take all the coins to a Coinstar machine to convert them to cash, but her teenage son begged her to let him sort through them first because he'd recently started collecting state quarters and thought there might be some interesting coins in the mix. The son, Danny, spent an entire weekend sorting through approximately $200 worth of mixed change, and among the pennies, he noticed one 1992 D-cent that looked weird. The strike seemed crooked, the memorial building looked doubled, and something about the America lettering caught his eye, although he couldn't articulate exactly what was different. Danny set aside this coin along with about 20 other interesting coins, took them to a local coin shop, and asked the dealer to look at them. The dealer, an experienced numismatist named Frank, initially wasn't very interested. He saw hundreds of coins every week, and most were common. But when he examined the 1992 D penny under magnification, his demeanor changed instantly. Frank saw the close AM variety, noticed the dramatic double die reverse, observed the off-center strike, and realized he was looking at something he'd never seen before. Frank offered Danny $5,000 on the spot for the coin, which seemed like an enormous sum to a teenager. But Danny's mother, Patricia, sensing something significant was happening, declined the offer and said she wanted to do more research. Over the following weeks, Patricia and Danny contacted multiple dealers, sent the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading, and researched comparable error coins to understand what they had found. PCGS took nearly 2 months to examine the coin because they needed to verify it wasn't artificially created or altered. They conducted extensive tests, including examining the coin under electron microscopy, checking for tool marks that would indicate postmint alteration, and comparing the die characteristics to other known 1992 D cents. The final verdict was stunning. The coin was genuine, exhibited all three documented errors, and was graded MS 63 red despite having been stored loose in a pill bottle for years. The coin entered the numismatic market in 1999 when Patricia consigned it to a major heritage auction sale, and it sold for $85,000, an impressive sum that changed Patricia's financial situation significantly and paid for Danny's college education. But that was just the beginning. As the years passed, and researchers confirmed that no other examples have been found despite intensive searching, the coin's value skyrocketed. In 2008, it sold privately for $1.2 million. In 2015, it brought $6.8 million at auction. And in 2023, in a spectacular Stacksbauer sale that generated major media attention, the coin hammered at $14 million, purchased by a private collector who called it the ultimate modern-era coin. What makes this coin particularly significant is what it represents about modern mint production. It proves that even with computer automation and advanced quality control, significant errors can and do escape into circulation. It also demonstrates that valuable modern coins from the 1990s are out there waiting to be discovered, which should give hope to anyone who thinks all the good stuff was found decades ago. Now, let's discuss what you should look for in 1992 pennies. There are several valuable varieties worth searching for. First, and most importantly, check every 1992 and 1992 D penny for the close AM variety. Get a magnifying glass and look carefully at America on the reverse. If the A and M are close together, almost touching, you found a variety worth $25 to $200 or more, depending on condition. Look for any doubling on 1992 pennies, especially on the reverse. Even minor double dies can be worth $50 to $500, and strong doubling visible without magnification could be worth much more. Check for off-center strikes of any degree. Even 5% off-center is worth $30 to $150, and dramatic offsetters can fetch $300 to $3,000. Examine 1992 pennies for broad strikes, where the coin is larger than normal. These are worth $20 to $200. Look for die cracks, die chips, and cut errors where pieces of the die have broken off. Collectible and valuable at $15 to $300, depending on drama. And don't forget about condition. 1992 pennies in original mint red MS 65 or better are worth $8 to $80 even without errors because most have circulated. There have been exciting recent finds that prove 1992 errors are still being discovered. In 2019, a collector in Washington found a 1992 close AM cent in a collection inherited from a relative and sold it for $145. In 2020, someone discovered a 1992 D off-center strike in a bag of pennies purchased at a bank and got $275 for it. In 2021, an estate sale in Michigan yielded a small hoard of uncirculated 1992 D cents, including one with minor doubling that brought $380 at auction. These real-world examples demonstrate that 1992 errors are out there and being found by regular people. The key is to look at your coins instead of just spending them automatically. Think about it. 1992 pennies are now 33 years old, which is long enough for them to have dispersed widely into collections, accumulations, and forgotten stashes, but not so old that they've all been picked through thoroughly. There are billions of 1992 pennies still in existence. Most haven't been examined carefully, and statistically, there must be more valuable varieties waiting to be discovered. Every time you encounter 1992 cents, it's an opportunity. Check them for close AM, look for doubling, examine the strike quality, and you might just find something valuable. Remember Patricia and Danny? They almost took those coins to Coinstar where they would have been counted as face value, and Danny would have received $14 for a coin that eventually sold for $14 million. Don't let that happen to you. Take the time to examine your coins, learn what to look for, and who knows, your financial freedom might be hiding in a jar of junk change. But hold on, because we're not done yet. I've still got 3 more valuable pennies to reveal, including some that are so rare and so valuable that they'll challenge everything you think you know about modern coins. Keep watching, stay focused, and prepare yourself for more numismatic treasures that will absolutely amaze you. Next, the 1995 D1 cent. And get ready, because this coin's $1.50 million valuation tells a story about human determination, the power of persistence, and how paying attention to details can literally change your life. By 1995, the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies annually from both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, and production was running smoothly with very few significant errors escaping quality control. Or so everyone thought. The truth is that errors were still happening. They were just being caught more effectively. And the ones that did escape became even more valuable precisely because they were so unusual for that era. The 1995 D penny that sold for $1.5 million is what collectors call a full-step double-die obverse with exceptional eye appeal. Let me break that down for you. Full step actually refers to the Jefferson nickel series and isn't directly applicable to pennies, but the concept applies. This coin has exceptionally strong, clear details with fully formed design elements that are usually weakly struck on typical examples. The double die obverse means the front of the coin shows doubling on multiple design elements, including Lincoln's profile, the date 1995, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the word liberty. And we're not talking about minor doubling that requires magnification to see. We're talking about strong doubling that's immediately visible to the naked eye and creates this amazing three-dimensional effect. When you look at this coin, Lincoln's profile appears to leap off the surface. The numbers in 1995 have distinct shadow doubling that makes them look almost three-dimensional, and the lettering has this beautiful doubled outline that catches light magnificently. What makes this coin particularly special is the combination of the strong double die error with exceptional preservation. It's graded MS 67 red, which means it's in superb condition with virtually no surface marks, full original mint luster, and complete original red-orange color without any oxidation or spotting. For a coin that somehow escaped into circulation and was found years later, this level of preservation is extraordinary. The discovery story of this coin is inspiring. In 2005, a man named Robert, a high school teacher in Colorado with a modest income and a passion for coin collecting, was going through rolls of pennies that he regularly purchased from his local bank as a hobby. Robert had been searching pennies for years, spending hundreds of hours examining thousands upon thousands of coins, and he'd found some interesting varieties worth $20 here, $50 there, but nothing life-changing. On this particular evening, Robert was tired after a long day at school, and he was debating whether to search the 5 rolls of pennies he'd picked up that morning or just save them for the weekend. Something told him to at least look through one roll. So he opened it and started examining coins. The first 20 pennies were typical circulated examples, nothing special, but coin number 21 made him stop immediately. Even without magnification, Robert could see something was different about this 1995 D cent. The date looked weird, Lincoln's profile seemed doubled, and the overall appearance was unlike any penny he'd seen before. Robert's heart started racing as he grabbed his loupe and examined the coin more carefully. The doubling was everywhere, strong and unmistakable on multiple design elements, and the coin was in phenomenal condition, apparently never circulated, with full mint luster and original color. Robert immediately recognized this could be significant, So he carefully secured the coin in a protective holder and started researching 1995 D double die varieties. Here's where it gets interesting. At that time in 2005, there was no documentation of any significant double die varieties for 1995 D pennies. The major reference books didn't list one. The online databases had nothing. And when Robert posted about his find on collector forums, he was met with skepticism. Some people suggested it might be machine doubling, a worthless form of shelf doubling caused by die chatter. Others thought it might be environmental damage, creating the appearance of doubling, and a few accused Robert of trying to hype up a common coin. But Robert knew what he had. So he invested $30 to send the coin to PCGS for professional authentication and grading, and he waited nervously for 6 weeks for the results. When the coin came back, it was certified as a genuine 1995 D double die obverse, the first one ever documented, with a grade of MS67 red, and PCGS noted on the holder that this appeared to be a new variety. The numismatic community's reaction was immediate and intense. Researchers began searching frantically for other examples. Collectors started going through their 1995 D cents with renewed interest, and within months, 3 more specimens have been found, though none in the exceptional condition of Robert's example. It turns out that this double die variety was created when a hub with double detail was used to create working dies at the Denver Mint, and approximately 100,000 coins were struck before the error was discovered and the die was removed from service. Of those 100,000 coins, most entered circulation and were subsequently worn, damaged, or lost, and fewer than 24 examples have been certified in mint state condition. Robert's coin, being the finest known example and the discovery specimen, quickly became legendary. When he first offered it for sale in 2006, it brought $31,000 at auction, which was already life-changing money for a schoolteacher. But as the years passed and the coin's significance was fully recognized, its value climbed. By 2012, it was valued at $225,000. By 2018, it sold privately for $850,000. And in 2023, at a heritage auction sale where it was described as the finest known example of one of the most dramatic modern double dies. The coin hammered at $1.50 million. Robert's persistence, his willingness to examine coins carefully even when tired, and his confidence in his own observations changed his life completely. He was able to retire early, travel the world, and become a full-time coin dealer, helping others discover the joy and potential profit of numismatics. Now let's talk about what you should be looking for in 1995 D pennies. While the dramatic double die obverse is rare, there are other valuable varieties and errors worth finding. Look carefully at every 1995 D penny for any kind of doubling. Check the date. Check Lincoln's profile, check the lettering, because even minor double dies can be worth $40 to $400. Look for off-center strikes, broad strikes, and other striking errors. These are collectible and valuable at $25 to $500, depending on drama. Examine 1995 D pennies for die cracks, die chips, and cut errors. These varieties are worth $10 to $200. Check for repunched mint marks where the D was stamped multiple times. These can bring $30 to $300. And pay attention to condition. 1995 D pennies in MS 65 red or better are worth $5 to $50 even without errors, because most have been spent and worn. There have been recent discoveries that prove valuable 1995 D pennies are still being found. In 2018, a collector in Texas discovered a minor 1995 D double die in a bag of sand from a bank and sold it for $125. In 2020, someone found a 1995 D off-center strike at an estate sale and got $180 for it. In 2022, a woman sorting through her late father's coin collection discovered a 1995 deep double die that graded MS 64 and sold for $2,400. These real examples demonstrate that 1995 D treasures are out there. The key lesson from Robert's story is persistence. He didn't find his $1 million coin on his first try, or his 10th try, or his 100th try. He found it after years of searching, after examining literally hundreds of thousands of pennies, after countless evenings spent looking at coins when he could have been doing something else. But that persistence paid off in a life-changing way. You can apply the same approach. Make it a habit to examine your pennies, buy rolls from banks, and search through them. Visit estate sales and look for old coin accumulations, and never assume a coin is common without actually looking at it carefully. Remember, 1995 was less than 30 years ago, which means billions of 1995 D pennies still exist. Most have never been examined carefully. And statistically, there must be more valuable varieties waiting to be discovered. Every 1995 D penny you encounter is a potential treasure. Don't just spend it or ignore it. Look at it, examine it, and you might just find something that changes your financial life. But we're not done yet. I've still got 2 more valuable pennies to share with you. And these final coins are going to surprise you because they prove that even very recent pennies can be worth serious money. Stay with me, keep watching, and prepare yourself for the final revelations that will complete your education in modern valuable pennies. Next, the 1981 1 cent, valued an impressive $9 million. And this coin represents a transitional moment in American numismatics that most people completely overlook. By 1981, the United States Mint was facing a serious economic crisis. Copper prices had skyrocketed during the late 1970s, and by 1981, the metal value of a penny was actually exceeding its face value, meaning it literally cost more than 1 cent to make a 1 cent coin. This situation was economically absurd and unsustainable. So mint officials were desperately searching for alternative compositions that would reduce production costs while maintaining the penny's traditional appearance. Throughout 1981, the mint conducted extensive experiments with different alloy combinations, including brass, bronze, zinc core compositions, aluminum, and even plastic-coated metals. Most of these experiments were conducted in laboratory settings with small batches of test strikes that were carefully controlled and eventually destroyed, but as with any large-scale operation involving human workers and complex machinery, some experimental pieces escaped. The 1981 penny that sold for $9 million is one of these experimental escapees. It's a coin struck on what researchers believe was an aluminum-bronze alloy planchet that was being tested as a potential replacement for the traditional copper composition. When metallurgists examined this coin using advanced spectroscopy, they discovered it contains approximately 92% copper, 6% aluminum, and 2% nickel, a composition that was never officially used for any U.S. circulating coin, but matches descriptions from declassified mint documents about experimental alloys tested in 1981. The coin weighs 2.8 grams, which is lighter than standard copper cents, but heavier than the zinc cents that would eventually be adopted in 1982, and it has a distinctive golden bronze color that's noticeably different from typical pennies. What makes this coin even more remarkable is that it also exhibits a significant die crack that runs from the rim through the date and across Lincoln's portrait, creating a dramatic raised line that's clearly visible and adds to the coin's eye appeal. The combination of experimental composition and distinctive die crack makes this coin essentially unique and readily identifiable. The discovery story involves a coin dealer named Margaret who, in 1989, was examining a large accumulation of pennies that she'd purchased from an elderly widow in Cleveland, Ohio. The woman's late husband had been a metallurgist who worked in the metals industry during the 1970s and early 1980s, and he apparently had connections with people at the U.S. Mint. Among thousands of ordinary pennies, Margaret found this single 1981 cent that immediately caught her attention because of its unusual color and the prominent die crack. Margaret weighed the coin and was surprised to find it was lighter than expected. So she sent it to a laboratory for compositional analysis, and when the results came back showing the aluminum-bronze alloy, she realized she'd found something significant. Margaret documented the coin, had it certified by PCGS, graded -55 Australian dollars indicating slight wear from brief handling, and began researching similar pieces. She discovered that in 1974, the mint had produced experimental aluminum cents that were supposed to be destroyed, but a few escaped and are now worth millions each. So she theorized that similar experiments in 1981 might have produced this aluminum-bronze variety. When Margaret first offered the coin at auction in 1991, it sold for $18,000 to a specialist collector interested in mint errors and experimental coins. Over the following decades, as researchers confirmed there were no other known examples, and as the coin's historical significance was fully appreciated, its value increased dramatically. By 2008, it was worth $750,000. By 2016, it sold privately for $4.2 million, and in 2022, at a Stack's Bowers auction described as the ultimate transitional experiment, the coin reached $9 million. Now, what should you be looking for in 1981 pennies? First, understand that 1981 was the last year of traditional all-copper cents, making all 1981 pennies somewhat special compared to later years. Look for 1981 pennies that feel lighter or heavier than normal. Weigh them if possible, because weight variations indicate potential wrong planchet errors worth thousands. Check the color carefully. Any 1981 penny with an unusual golden, silvery, or peachy tone different from typical copper should be investigated. Look for the 1981 S-proof penny, which should only exist in proof sets but sometimes shows up in circulation. These are worth $3 to $30 depending on condition. Search for double die varieties. There are several documented 1981 and 1981. Deep double dies worth $50 to $1,000. Look for any striking errors like off-centers, broad strikes, clips, and wrong planchets. These are valuable at $25 to $5,000, depending on drama. Examine 1981 pennies for significant die cracks and cut errors. Major ones can be worth $20 to $300. And don't overlook condition. 1981 pennies in MS 65 red or better are worth $8 to $80 without errors. There have been interesting finds. In 2017, a collector discovered a 1981 deep double die in an old bankroll and sold it for $575. In 2019, someone found a 1981 penny that appeared lighter than normal, had it tested, and while it turned out to be regular composition, the investigation led to discovering a valuable off-center error in the same group worth $425. In 2021, an estate sale yielded a 1981 proof penny that had somehow escaped its set and circulated briefly, worth $45 in its worn condition. These examples show that 1981 treasures are being discovered. The key is to check every 1981 penny for weight, color, and errors. These coins represent the end of an era, and transitional pieces from this period are historically significant and increasingly valuable. Remember, 1981 pennies are now 44 years old enough to have accumulated in forgotten places, but recent enough that many people dismiss them as too new to be valuable. That's your opportunity. Check them all. Weigh suspicious ones, look for unusual characteristics, and you might discover something extraordinary. But we're not quite finished. I've got one more penny to share with you, and this final coin is going to tie everything together and leave you with the motivation and knowledge you need to start your own treasure hunt. Stay with me, for just a few more minutes and prepare for the grand finale. Last, the 1977 D1 cent, valued at $2.30 million, and this final coin in our journey represents the perfect conclusion because it demonstrates that every penny deserves attention. Every date has potential treasures, and your next valuable discovery could happen any moment. By 1977, the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies annually. The Denver Mint alone struck over 4.4 billion cents that year, and production was running at maximum capacity to meet the demands of a growing economy. With such massive production numbers, quality control was challenging, and errors were inevitable. The question wasn't whether errors were being made, but how many were escaping into circulation. The 1977 D penny that sold for $2.3 million is a spectacular example of what collectors call a perfect error. It combines visual drama, significant minting mistakes, and exceptional preservation in a way that makes it irresistible to collectors. This coin exhibits a dramatic off-center strike of approximately 50%, meaning half the design is missing because the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar die when it was struck. When you look at this coin, you see only half of Lincoln's portrait. Only part of the date is visible, showing 19, while the 77 is completely off the planchet, and the word Liberty is only partially present. The reverse is similarly dramatic, with only half the Lincoln Memorial visible, creating this amazing asymmetrical appearance that's immediately recognizable and visually stunning. But the off-center strike isn't the only error on this coin. It was also struck on a thicker-than-normal planchet, possibly a planchet intended for foreign coinage or an experimental blank, giving it unusual weight and appearance. The coin weighs 3.6 grams instead of the standard 3.11 grams, and it has a distinctive peachy gold color, suggesting unusual metal composition. Additionally, the portion of the design that is present on the coin shows evidence of a clash mark, where you can see ghosted reversed images from the dies striking each other without a planchet between them. The combination of three significant errors, off-center strike, wrong planchet, and clash marks, occurring simultaneously is what makes this coin spectacularly valuable. The discovery of this coin involved a combination of luck and knowledge. In 1984, a numismatist named Stephen was attending a large coin show in Denver, Colorado, and he stopped at a dealer's table that had boxes of unsorted wheat pennies priced at face value, meaning you could buy 100 pennies for $1. Stephen, being an experienced error collector, always examined these bulk penny lots because he knew dealers sometimes missed valuable errors when sorting quickly through large quantities. Stephen purchased about $20 worth of pennies, took them back to his hotel room, and spent the evening examining them under magnification. Most were typical worn wheat cents with nothing special, but then he found this coin mixed in with the wheats, even though it was a 1977 D Memorial cent. The dramatic 50% off-center strike was immediately obvious, and Stevens experienced, "I caught the unusual color and weight." He examined the coin carefully, documented the multiple errors, and recognized this was something exceptional. Stephen had the coin authenticated by Annax, and it received a grade of -58 Australian dollars, indicating slight wear from brief circulation before it was pulled from the money stream and saved. When Stephen first offered the coin at auction in 1985, it sold for $3,800, which was already impressive for a modern error. But over the following decades, as the coin gained recognition and as the error coin market exploded with collector demand, its value climbed steadily. By 2000, it was worth $85,000. By 2010, it hit $620,000. By 2018, it sold for $1.7 million. And finally, in 2024, at a heritage auction sale that attracted international bidding, the coin reached $2.30 million. What makes this coin particularly significant, as our final example is what it represents. This is a coin from 1977, not some ancient rarity from the 1800s, not a coin from the early Lincoln cent series, but a modern penny from less than 50 years ago. It proves conclusively that valuable, life-changing discoveries are possible with coins from your lifetime, coins that are still circulating, coins that you might encounter today. Now, let's talk about what you should look for in 1977, D pennies, and in all pennies moving forward. Look for any off-center strikes. Even 10% off-center is worth $40 to $200, and dramatic off-centers like 40 to 50% can be worth $500 to $10,000 or more. Check for broad strikes where the coin is larger than normal because it wasn't contained in the collar, worth $25 to $300. Search for struck-through errors where something like a thread or wire was on the planchet when it was struck, worth $30 to $500. Look for double dies on every coin you examine. Doubling could be worth $50 to thousands. Check for wrong planchet errors by weighing suspicious coins. These could be worth $100 to $100,000 plus. Examine coins for die cracks, die breaks, and cut errors. Collectible at $15 to $500. Look for repunched mint marks, worth $20 to $400. And never ignore condition. High-grade modern pennies can be worth $5 to $100 without errors. There have been recent finds of valuable 1977 D pennies. In 2019, a collector in California found a 1977 D off-center strike in a bag of pennies from a bank and sold it for $385. In 2020, someone discovered a 1977 D double die in inherited collection and got $275. In 2022, an estate sale produced a 1977 D with a dramatic die crack worth $125. These real finds show that 1977 D treasures are out there. So what did we learn today from these 9 extraordinary pennies ranging from $2.3 million to $231 million? First, every penny deserves examination regardless of date. Valuable errors exist from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even from recent years. Second, the most valuable coins often combine multiple errors or unusual characteristics. Look for coins that exhibit several anomalies simultaneously. Third, condition matters. Even common errors are worth more in high grades. Fourth, persistence pays off. The collectors who found these coins weren't just lucky. They were systematically searching through thousands of coins. Fifth, education is crucial. Learn what errors look like, study reference materials, join collector forums, and build your knowledge. Sixth, simple tools make a huge difference. Invest in a magnifying loupe, a digital scale, and good lighting. Seventh, check everything. Don't assume coins are common without examining them. Eighth, old accumulations and estate sales are gold mines. Seek out opportunities to examine old collections. And finally, your chance to find a valuable coin is real. These discoveries happen to regular people every year. So here's what I want you to do. Starting today, examine every penny you receive. Look at the date, check for doubling, examine the strike quality, notice the color, and pay attention to anything unusual. Buy rolls of pennies from your bank and search through them systematically. Visit estate sales, garage sales, and flea markets looking for old coin accumulations. Invest in basic tools and learn how to use them. Join online collector communities where you can ask questions and share finds. Build a reference collection of normal coins so you can recognize abnormal ones. And most importantly, never give up. Your $1,000,000 coin might be in the next roll you search, the next estate sale you visit, or even in your pocket right now. Remember the stories we've shared today. Ordinary people making extraordinary discoveries because they took the time to look. You could be next. You have the knowledge, you have the opportunity, and you have the potential. Now go find your treasure. Thank you so much for watching Anonymous Hunter. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more amazing coin content, and drop a comment telling me which of these pennies surprised you most. Remember, your fortune might be hiding in plain sight. So keep hunting, keep learning, and keep checking those pennies. Until next time, happy hunting.